The phone buzzed at 3 a.m., and Emily jolted awake, her heart hammering as she fumbled in the dark for the screen that glowed with dread. It wasn't a sweet message or even his voice, but a single text from Michael that read, "We need to talk." She whispered to herself, "Why now? Why like this?" Her chest tightened as she stared at the words, hoping they would vanish if she blinked hard enough. The silence of the night pressed against her ears, heavy and cruel, while shadows in her room seemed to mock her trembling hands. She thought of all the nights she waited for his call, all the mornings she forced herself to smile. Now, with 6 words, he had pulled the floor out from beneath her. Emily whispered, "I gave everything for this," as tears blurred the screen. Her hope cracked in the stillness, and the truth gnawed at her. Something was already broken. Emily sat frozen long after the message, her chest rising in uneven gasps as her mind raced through every possible meaning. "We need to talk" was a sentence that had no mercy, and it burned into her skull. She recalled Michael's promises of forever, the laughter they once shared, the nights when his voice lulled her into sleep. Now every word seemed cheap, every vow a lie she should have seen coming. She whispered, "Why does love turn cruel in silence?" The shadows felt heavier, pressing her deeper into despair. Her phone stayed in her hand, glowing faintly, daring her to reply, but fear shackled her fingers. She imagined him far away, perhaps already moving on, while she was trapped in the dark, suffocating with unanswered questions. She prayed it was a misunderstanding, yet deep inside, she knew some doors never open again. Emily pressed her forehead against the cold glass of the window, her breath fogging up the pain as her tears blurred the distant city lights. She whispered, "Michael, tell me this isn't goodbye." The silence outside was louder than her sobs, and every car passing felt like a cruel reminder of his absence. She remembered the countless times she had stayed awake just to hear his voice, sacrificing sleep and sanity for love across oceans. The city looked alive, glowing and indifferent, while she stood hollow, her world shrinking to the size of a glowing message. She hated how her heart still ached for him, how she was willing to forgive before even knowing the truth. Her reflection stared back at her, broken and desperate, a stranger who once believed love could survive anything. The clock ticked past 4 a.m., and Emily still hadn't moved, her body heavy with exhaustion, but her mind spinning like a storm. She thought of Michael's laughter, the way he once said, "Distance means nothing if love is strong." Now those words mocked her. She clenched her fists and whispered, "Then why do I feel abandoned?" Memories of their first meeting, their first promises, flooded in like cruel ghosts. Every joyful moment now cut like a knife, reminding her of the growing chasm between them. Her pillow carried the scent of old dreams, but the weight of betrayal pressed harder. She felt a scream rising inside, but only silence escaped. For the first time, she wondered if waiting had been her biggest mistake, and the thought shattered her fragile hope. Emily buried her face in her hands as the phone slipped from her grasp onto the floor with a dull thud. The sound echoed like a verdict, final and cold. She thought of calling him back, begging for answers, but pride tangled with fear, choking her. Her heart screamed for Michael, yet her mind whispered that his silence was already her answer. She whispered, "I waited, I believed, I gave everything." The room spun, a blur of shadows and regrets, while dawn's pale light crept into the edges of night. Her body trembled, drained from the storm within, yet her heart clung stubbornly to a hope that hurt more than any truth. She realized that love, once her anchor, had now become the weight dragging her under. The kitchen was filled with morning light, yet Emily felt no warmth as she sat at the table staring into her untouched coffee. The steam curled upward, fading like the remnants of her belief in Michael's words. She whispered, "He promised forever," and I believed him. The refrigerator hummed, the only sound in the stillness, and it mocked her silence. Her phone rested face down, daring her to flip it over, yet fear chained her hands. Every imagined buzz made her chest lurch, followed by disappointment heavy enough to crush her. She thought of the nights she had waited, The long hours of sacrificing rest just for the sound of his laugh. Now the memory was poisoned, hollow echoes taunting her. She muttered, "Was I blind or desperate?" The light streaming across her face revealed exhaustion, carved deep beneath her skin, her reflection on the table surface staring back as if she were already a stranger. The ache wasn't only for him, but for the pieces of herself she realized she had given away. Later that day, Emily slipped into a crowded cafe, hoping the noise would numb the storm inside her. The air smelled of roasted beans and laughter, sounds she couldn't join. She sat by the window, her fingers wrapped around a teacup that had already gone cold. Couples at nearby tables leaned close, their smiles cutting into her like sharpened glass. She whispered, "Why am I still holding on to silence?" Her mind replayed the paragraphs she had sent, love woven into words that were now lost in unanswered threads. She remembered when she pictured Michael here, reaching across the table to squeeze her hand. But that fantasy was cruel now. The cafe's golden lamps bathed strangers in warmth, yet no light touched her. Each reflection on the glass showed her isolation more clearly, her figure outlined by loneliness. She felt like a ghost haunting a life that had already abandoned her. That night, Emily lay in bed with her phone glowing against her face, scrolling through messages that once felt like lifelines. Michael's words had been promises, typed hurriedly across time zones, and each one now cut like a lie. She whispered, "Did you mean any of this?" Her thumb hovered over the keyboard, desperate to type, but fear froze her. She remembered when he first called her beautiful, when his laughter spilled through the static and lifted her spirit. The memory burned now, the sweetness turned bitter. Tears welled as she buried her face in the pillow, muffling her sobs into the fabric. "I gave you everything," she whispered to the emptiness. The silence of the room was louder than thunder, pressing against her chest until her breaths grew shallow. The glow of the screen blurred in her vision, and she realized she was clinging not to love, but to the shadow of a man already gone. The next morning, Emily walked through the park, surrounded by children's laughter and the hum of conversations. The sun was bright, the air alive with warmth, yet she felt none of it. She whispered, "Michael, where are you?" Her steps slowed as memories surfaced. He once promised to sit beside her here, to feed birds and laugh under the trees. Now that promise lingered like a ghost, mocking her solitude. She found an empty bench, her fingers wrapped tight around her phone, staring at the blank screen as if it might wake with his presence. The breeze tangled her hair, and she closed her eyes, pretending for a moment he was near. But when she opened them, the seat beside her remained empty, painfully real. Around her, life bloomed, and people moved forward, yet she remained frozen, tethered to a love that no longer lived in her world. That evening, Emily sat with her friend Sarah, who had watched her unravel for weeks. Sarah's voice was gentle, but edged with steel as she said, "You are breaking yourself for someone who doesn't answer." Emily lowered her gaze, her lips trembling, whispering, "But what if he still loves me?" Sarah's eyes softened, yet she shook her head. "Love doesn't ignore. Love doesn't leave you begging." The words struck sharp, truth wrapped in pain. Emily's chest tightened, pride and shame battling within her. She hated how much she still wanted to believe Michael's promises, hated the hope that kept her chained. Sarah placed her hand over Emily's, grounding her. "You deserve more than silence," she said softly. Tears blurred Emily's eyes as she nodded, but inside her heart screamed for Michael, even as reason told her the waiting was already destroying her. Emily's calls rang endlessly into silence, her voice swallowed by static and unanswered tones. She whispered, "Pick up, Michael, please," but the line stayed cold. Each failed attempt cut deeper, the rejection louder than words. Her chest ached as she remembered birthdays missed, promises to call broken with excuses that grew thinner every time. The miles between them stretched further each day, and suspicion slipped in where trust used to live. She stared at her phone, imagining him with new friends, maybe with someone closer, someone who didn't need to wait. Her hands shook as she muttered, "I stayed awake for you, I waited through everything, and now I'm nothing." The room felt suffocating. the silence pressing into her bones. Every unanswered call became proof that the love she clung to was already slipping away. Tears blurred the screen as she realized the space between them wasn't distance anymore. It was absence. Emily scrolled through social media, her chest tightening as Michael's name appeared in photos she wasn't part of. He was smiling, arm draped casually around a woman she didn't know. The caption filled with laughter. Her pulse quickened, jealousy sharp enough to wound. "Who is she?" Emily whispered, anger and fear colliding. She zoomed in on his expression, searching for guilt, but all she saw was freedom. The distance between them suddenly felt like a wall she could never climb. She threw her phone onto the bed, pacing the room as questions burned inside her. Was this the truth behind unanswered calls? Was she being replaced while she wasted nights waiting? Her heart begged for denial, but her mind whispered a harsher reality. The images replayed like cruel evidence, each one shattering the fragile hope she had left. For the first time, Emily felt not only abandoned but betrayed. At work, Emily struggled to hide the storm inside her. Her coworker David asked if she was okay, concern in his tone, but she forced a brittle smile. "I'm fine," she said, though her voice cracked. Her thoughts betrayed her, replaying Michael's broken promises against the reality of his silence. She stared at her computer screen, words blurring as tears threatened. David placed a gentle hand on her shoulder and whispered, "You can't keep breaking yourself for him." She wanted to snap, to defend Michael. But the truth in David's eyes pierced her. She muttered, "He said, love would survive the distance." The words felt empty now, hollow in her mouth. The office buzzed with life around her, yet she felt completely detached. Every laugh in the background made her isolation sharper. She realized she was losing not only Michael, but pieces of herself in the waiting. That night, Emily lay staring at the ceiling, her thoughts looping like a broken record. Michael's laughter in the photos haunted her, mingled with the sound of his promises still echoing in her ears. She whispered, "I gave up everything for you, and you gave me silence." Her pillow was damp with tears, her body heavy with exhaustion, yet her mind refused to rest. Every unanswered call replayed in her head, each one twisting the knife. The weight of waiting had shifted into torment, her hope now suffocating instead of sustaining. She turned onto her side, clutching the pillow as if it were his shoulder, but it offered no warmth. Her voice cracked as she muttered, "Do you even think of me?" The shadows stretched across her walls, whispering answers she didn't want to hear. The distance was no longer measured in miles, but in the absence of love. The following evening, Emily sat across from Sarah at a quiet diner, her voice trembling as she confessed the photos she had seen. Sarah frowned deeply, her tone blunt but steady. "Emily, he's living another life without you." Emily's eyes filled, her hands gripping the edge of the table as she whispered, "But I still love him." Sarah leaned forward, frustration mixing with compassion. "Love doesn't hurt like this. You deserve better." Emily shook her head, clinging to a fragile thread of hope, muttering, "Maybe it's just a misunderstanding." Sarah's gaze hardened. "No, you're drowning in excuses." The clink of cutlery and quiet chatter of other diners filled the air. But for Emily, it all blurred. The truth pressed hard against her chest, undeniable and merciless. Her loyalty had become her chain, and for the first time she felt its weight crushing her. Emily sat alone in her room, clutching her phone as she scrolled through messages that once brought comfort. Her chest tightened when she stumbled across one she hadn't noticed before, a careless line from Michael. "I can't keep hiding this anymore." The words burned like acid, setting her mind racing. She whispered, "Hiding what?" Her stomach twisted as she scrolled further, finding fragments of conversations that hinted at another life he hadn't shared with her. She thought of the laughter in the photos, the unknown woman by his side, and realized this wasn't her imagination. The silence wasn't distance, it was deception. Tears welled as she muttered, "All this time was I the secret?" Her heart pounded with betrayal, the weight of every sacrifice crashing into her. She had given up so much, only to discover she was holding on to half-truths. The foundation of her love fractured in an instant, leaving nothing but jagged edges. Emily's trembling fingers tapped into Michael's profile again, scrolling deeper until she saw a tagged post that froze her in place. There he was, smiling with the same woman, their hands entwined. The caption read, "To new beginnings." Her breath caught, sharp as a knife. She whispered, "He already started over." The betrayal hit harder than any silence, because now she had proof. All those nights she waited, all those hours she believed, and he was living a life that excluded her completely. She slammed the phone down, pacing the room as rage and heartbreak clashed within her. "How could you do this to me?" she muttered, voice breaking. Her vision blurred with tears, the world spinning as denial collapsed into truth. She realized she hadn't just lost him. She had lost the person she thought he was. The image of their joined hands haunted her like a scar she could never erase. The next day, Emily met Sarah in the park, her voice trembling as she held out her phone. "Look," she whispered, showing the photo. Sarah's eyes hardened as she read the caption. "Emily, this isn't distance. This is betrayal." Emily's knees felt weak as she sat heavily on the bench. She muttered, "I waited for him. I believed every word." Sarah placed her hand on Emily's arm, steady but firm. "You gave him everything, and he gave you lies." Emily wanted to argue, to defend Michael, but the evidence glared back at her. Her chest tightened as she admitted softly, "He never planned on coming back." The truth left her breathless, like the air had been stolen from her lungs. Sarah whispered, "You deserve someone who chooses you, not someone who hides you." Emily bowed her head, tears dripping onto her hands. Her hope finally cracked into something beyond repair. That evening, Emily sat at her desk, staring at a half-written letter she had once planned to send to Michael. The words, "I miss you," mocked her from the page. Her pen shook as she whispered, "You didn't miss me at all." She thought of the money she had spent to visit him, the jobs she turned down just to stay available for calls. Each sacrifice now felt like a cruel joke. Her loyalty had been a currency he never valued. She pushed the paper away, her chest burning with grief and anger. "I was building a life for us, and you were building one without me," she muttered. The realization cut deeper than silence ever could. She stared at the letter until the ink blurred through her tears, the page ruined like her dreams. For the first time, she didn't want to reach out to him. She wanted to reclaim herself from the wreckage. Emily sat by the window as night fell, the city lights flickering below like stars she couldn't touch. Her reflection stared back, pale and hollow, eyes red with tears. She whispered, "I was never part of his plan." The truth settled heavy in her chest, colder than any silence. She realized Michael had chosen a new life, and she was a ghost left behind. Her loyalty, her waiting, her endless sacrifices meant nothing to him. She thought of the girl in the photos, radiant with the glow of belonging, and Emily felt the sting of being replaced. Her hand pressed against the glass, as if reaching for something that no longer existed. She muttered, "I gave him my heart, and he gave it away." The night swallowed her words, leaving her with nothing but the echo of betrayal. For the first time, she admitted that love had already ended. Emily sat on the edge of her bed, phone in hand, staring at Michael's number with trembling fingers. Her chest burned as she whispered, "This is the last time." She pressed the call button, her breath shallow as the ringing filled her ears. After a long pause, his voice finally answered, casual, detached. "Emily, why are you calling so late?" Her heart fractured at his tone, so distant, so cold. She whispered, "Because you left me waiting while you built a new life without me." Silence lingered, heavy, before Michael sighed. "You don't understand." Emily's voice shook as she snapped. "No, I understand perfectly. I was the secret, wasn't I?" Her tears flowed, but her anger burned hotter. "I stayed, I sacrificed, I believed. And you lied." The weight of her words echoed in the quiet, her voice trembling but fierce. For the first time, she wasn't begging, she was demanding truth. Michael's voice cracked faintly through the line, but his words were sharper than knives. "Emily, things changed. I couldn't keep living for a relationship that never felt real anymore. Her chest caved as if he had struck her. She whispered, "Not real. I gave everything to make us real." He sighed heavily, impatient. "You're too intense. You hold on too tight. I needed freedom." Emily's voice rose, breaking into a scream. "Freedom to betray me? Freedom to replace me?" Her hand shook violently as she pressed the phone tighter. "You said forever. You said distance meant nothing." Michael's silence only twisted the knife deeper, his hesitation proving guilt. Emily sobbed, voice cracking. "You used me. You let me waste years of my life while you planned your escape." The confrontation tore from her chest, her pain exploding after months of silence. It was no longer distance, it was betrayal laid bare. Michael's voice hardened as he muttered, "Emily, stop making me the villain. You always needed too much." I couldn't breathe. The words slammed into her like a blow. She whispered, "I only needed you to care." Her voice cracked, filled with sorrow. "You promised me love, Michael. You made me believe." His reply came cold. "Maybe I loved the idea of us, but not you, not anymore." Her stomach twisted violently, air fleeing her lungs. "Not anymore," repeated in her mind like a cruel echo. Her tears fell faster, dripping onto her trembling hands. She screamed into the phone, "You destroyed me. You made me believe I wasn't enough unless I kept waiting, kept begging." The silence that followed felt louder than his words. She realized that this wasn't love anymore. It was cruelty disguised as honesty. Every fragile piece of her heart shattered under his indifference. Emily's sobs quieted, replaced with a trembling calm as she whispered, "Tell me the truth. Was she there all along?" Michael hesitated before answering, "Yes, I didn't mean for it to happen, but it did." Her chest tightened, breath stolen by confirmation of her worst fear. She muttered, "So, while I waited, you already moved on." He exhaled slowly. "I didn't want to hurt you." Emily's voice cracked as she spat. "You didn't want to hurt me, but you left me to bleed in silence." Her body shook, rage and despair fusing into something unbearable. "I gave you my heart, and you gave it away like it was nothing." The line went silent, but his guilt spoke louder than words. Emily collapsed forward, tears soaking into her pillow as she clutched the phone. The truth was out, and it was more devastating than her imagination had ever been. Emily sat upright, face streaked with tears, but eyes burning with fire. She whispered, "I begged for your love, and all you gave me was betrayal." Michael sighed, muttering, "I never asked you to wait." Her rage snapped, sharp and final. "No, but you let me destroy myself for someone who was already gone." Her voice steadied, the tremor fading as anger transformed into strength. "You don't get to break me anymore." Silence filled the line, Michael's voice absent, his excuses gone. Emily's chest heaved, her tears falling, but there was steel beneath them now. "Goodbye, Michael," she whispered, pressing the phone screen until the call ended with a click. The silence afterward was suffocating, yet somehow liberating. Her hands trembled, but for the first time it wasn't from fear, it was from release. Confrontation left scars, but it also left her free. Morning light spilled into the room, and Emily sat in silence, staring at the phone that no longer carried Michael's voice. The call had ended, but the echo of betrayal lingered in her chest. She whispered, "It's really over." Her reflection in the dark screen showed swollen eyes, but also a flicker of something unfamiliar. Relief. She thought of the years she had spent waiting, sacrificing, believing in promises that turned to dust. The silence wasn't punishment anymore. It was clarity. Her body trembled as she muttered, "I survived the worst truth." The tears came again, but softer this time, not drowning but cleansing. She wrapped herself in the blanket, letting exhaustion finally pull her down. The ache hadn't vanished, but it had changed, shifting from suffocation to something bearable. For the first time, she felt the faint stirrings of strength beneath the grief, a small light pushing through the wreckage. Later that day, Emily walked through the park where she had once imagined Michael sitting beside her. The laughter of families and couples still filled the air, but it no longer pierced her as deeply. She sat on a bench, watching children run past, her hands resting loosely in her lap. She whispered, "You were never coming back, were you?" The wind tugged gently at her hair, and she closed her eyes, letting the sound of the leaves soothe her. She remembered how many hours she had spent chained to her phone, desperate for his messages, and realized how much of her life had slipped away. Her chest still ached, but it carried something steadier now. She muttered, "Maybe I deserve more than waiting." The thought startled her, fragile yet real. For the first time she saw herself not as the abandoned one, but as someone who could rise again. That evening, Emily sat across from Sarah at a quiet cafe, her voice steadier than before. She whispered, "I ended it." Sarah's eyes softened, relief replacing worry. "I'm proud of you," she said firmly, her tone filled with warmth. Emily lowered her gaze, fingers tracing the rim of her cup. "It hurt so much," she admitted, her voice breaking slightly. Sarah leaned closer, her hand reaching across the table. "It will hurt, but pain doesn't mean weakness. You faced the truth." Emily felt tears rise again, but they didn't drown her. Instead, they carried honesty she had been afraid to speak. She whispered, "I don't know who I am without him." Sarah's smile was gentle. "Then it's time to find out." Emily exhaled shakily, realizing that healing wasn't about forgetting him, but about remembering herself. The weight on her chest eased, replaced by a fragile but steady hope. That night, Emily returned home and gathered a small box from under her bed. Inside were letters, photos, and trinkets Michael had once sent her. Her fingers traced them gently, her chest tightening with each memory. She whispered, "This was everything I held on to." One by one, she laid them on the table, staring at the pieces of love that had already died. Tears fell as she muttered, "You don't get to own me anymore." Her hands shook as she placed the items back in the box and sealed it shut. The ache was sharp, but it was also freeing, like closing a chapter she had reread too many times. She set the box aside, her breathing steadier, her eyes red but resolute. For the first time, the silence in her apartment didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like space she could claim as her own again. Emily stood at her window, the city lights glowing below as night embraced the skyline. Her reflection stared back, weary but steadier, the rawness of grief softened into resolve. She whispered, "I thought I needed him to be whole, but I was wrong." The words felt strange, but liberating, as if she were rewriting her story. Her heart still ached, but it no longer felt like a cage. She pressed her hand to the glass, not reaching for Michael anymore, but for herself. The silence was still there, but it no longer screamed. It simply existed, leaving space for something new. She whispered softly, "I will not wait anymore." Tears glistened in her eyes, but this time they weren't only for loss, they were for release. The night wrapped around her gently, no longer cruel, and for the first time in years, she felt the faint promise of freedom. Emily sat at her desk, her laptop open to a blank document. She typed Michael's name, then backspaced until it disappeared. Her chest tightened, but she didn't stop. Instead, she began typing her own name, the letters steady beneath her trembling fingers. She whispered, "This story is mine now." She thought of the endless nights she had spent waiting, watching her identity shrink into nothing but a shadow of him. Now, each keystroke felt like a step forward, reclaiming herself piece by piece. The words flowed not about him, but about her survival, her pain, her strength. Tears blurred the screen, but they were different now, less of drowning, more of release. She muttered, "You may have broken me, but I'll rebuild stronger." The silence of her apartment no longer suffocated her. It gave her space to breathe. For the first time, the story she was writing wasn't about loss, it was about beginning again. Emily walked down the street as autumn leaves swirled around her, the crisp air sharp against her skin. She carried no phone in her hand this time, no lifeline to a man who had already left her behind. Instead, her hands were free, tucked into her jacket pockets, steady with purpose. She whispered, "I don't need his voice to feel alive." The city moved around her, strangers laughing, lights glowing, but she wasn't invisible anymore. She inhaled deeply, the cool air filling her lungs like freedom. Each step felt heavier with closure, lighter with possibility. She thought of the girl she had been, waiting by the phone, drowning in silence, and realized she no longer pitied her. That girl had survived long enough to arrive here. Her lips trembled, but this time in a smile fragile but real. She muttered, "I'm still here," and the words felt like victory. That evening, Emily sat across from Sarah at their favorite cafe. The clatter of cups and hum of voices surrounded them, but Emily felt strangely at peace. Sarah smiled, noticing the calm in her eyes. "You look lighter," she said softly. Emily laughed faintly, surprised at the sound of it. "I finally let go," she admitted, her voice steady. Sarah reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "I told you, you're stronger than you think." Emily blinked back tears, but this time they didn't sting. They soothed. "It still hurts," she confessed, "but it doesn't own me anymore." Sarah nodded, her smile warm. "That's healing." Emily sipped her coffee, realizing the taste felt richer now, no longer bitter with waiting. She whispered, "I'm learning to love myself again." For the first time, she believed the words. The cafe lights glowed softly, wrapping her in a warmth she hadn't felt in years. Later, Emily returned home and sat on the floor with the sealed box of Michael's things. She held it in her lap, her breath steady this time, not broken. She whispered, "You no longer define me." With deliberate hands, she carried it to the closet and placed it deep inside, out of sight. The act wasn't rage but closure, a quiet declaration that she would no longer let ghosts dictate her future. She exhaled slowly, the weight lifting from her chest as if the box carried not just memories, but chains. She muttered, "I release you." For a long moment she sat there, the silence around her soft, no longer cruel. Her body still trembled, but it was with release rather than despair. She realized she didn't need to erase the past, she only needed to stop living in it. And with that thought, a fragile kind of peace finally arrived. Emily stood at her window one final time, the city lights twinkling below like promises waiting to be discovered. Her reflection looked back, weary but alive, no longer broken. She whispered, "You were never coming back, Michael." The words didn't sting now. They settled like truth long accepted. Her lips curved into a faint, bittersweet smile as she added softly, "And that's okay." She pressed her palm against the glass, but this time it wasn't reaching for someone far away. It was grounding herself in the present. Her tears fell, quiet and slow, but they no longer drowned her, they freed her. The silence in the room felt different, no longer heavy with loss, but open with possibility. She closed her eyes, exhaled, and whispered the last words he would never hear. "And that was the last time your name ever lit up my phone."